Oh. Let me see how much damage I can tank.
Viessa has grown to be one of my favorite descendants, as she is one of the most comfortable picks for any content. What's good, folks? It's Nightmare Frame here with a new TFD video, coming at you with Beast Mode Viessa builds, one for general content and the other one for bossing. The bossing build is especially good for those who don't have nor want to be stuck using Glay. She provides so much utility for herself and even the team. She can crowd control enemies while also providing passive damage just from using her abilities. And not only that, she can regenerate her own shields while moving, at the same time slowing down every enemy around her. So if you love ice powers with a mix of gunplay, then she's a solid pick. I played every beta and always picked her as the first choice because of obvious reasons. Nothing else, but never fully leveled her, because as soon as they gave us the free beta resources, I always immediately dropped her for Glay and Freyna, and of course the free bunny. But now that I've actually given her a chance, dude, haha, I'm in love with her playstyle. So enough with the glazing, and let's get on with her abilities. Her passive, Ice Spheres, is bloated but simple to understand. Whenever she casts an ability that hits an enemy, they get affected by Ice Shackle. Ice Shackle is a debuff that slows down enemies, and there are different stages to this debuff that scale depending on what ability you use, from levels 1 to 4. She affects all types of enemies, including bosses. However, boss units have a lower duration on the debuff, otherwise it will be just broken. But also when using her abilities on enemies, she creates ice spheres, pretty much turrets that float behind her, throwing ice projectiles at enemies, and have a damage modifier that is only affected by your skill power and skill power modifier, and not any elemental skill modifiers. And she can only have a maximum of 3 turrets up at a time. Even though I just explained her passive, half of it is going to be scrapped, because I'll be using the skill module that changes her passive, making it even deadlier with all her abilities. Introducing Hypothermia. I hate this mod just because of how long it took to drop, while other peeps I was farming with dropped it 5 times in a row. Gotta love RNG. Anyway, this removes the shackle debuff from all your abilities, meaning you lose the slow debuff, but instead gain Ice Needle, a new type of debuff that inflicts damage over time with any of your abilities that trigger on an enemy. Even your movement skill now turns into a damaging ability. Her first ability, Frost Shards, throws a projectile that deals damage and explodes on contact. Nothing over the top, but you can see how many ice shackles it triggers. However, these stacks get converted into Ice Needle with the Hypothermia skill module. Frost Road, her movement ability that increases her movement speed by 30% and is not affected by skill power. This ability leaves behind a trail of ice that slows down enemies who make contact with it. Although the more you're on the move, you regenerate shields over time. Even though this is great to regen shields, building for shields is not worth it. And with Hypothermia, you lose the slow debuff, but you turn this movement ability into a damaging tool. Cold Snap, the third ability, launches a wave of ice that damages enemies in front of her in a conical shape. It's really good for instant deleting enemies right in front of you to follow up with your first ability. Also, it's really good to damage enemies who are holding up shields. Unfortunately, you cannot cast this ability mid-air. You have to be grounded. And finally, Blizzard. This is where she deploys a device that deals AoE chill damage. It has an initial hit followed up with continuous damage over time with a final burst to end the ability. Viessa has a 15% base crit chance with all of her abilities, so it is possible to build her for a crit DPS build. And she can crit into the millions with her first and fourth ability, as they have pretty high multipliers. And finally, her first 3 abilities are fusion aligned, while her fourth is tech. Building for her fourth alone isn't wise, meaning running a tech specialist or tech master would be a wasted mod slot for a generalized build. However, if you can reduce the cooldown to the point where it's low enough for a decent cast interval, then sure, go ahead. It does have a skill module that will be nice to try out later down the line. So before the build section, let's take a look at a simpler gameplay loop. Alright, here we are in the Fortress, hard difficulty. I'm just going to do this quick mission right here just to show you what you're going to expect when you're using this Viessa loadout. You can see at the bottom right there, my skills do have a new effect because of the Hypothermia skill module that augments her passive. So instead of shackling enemies, now it will deal damage over time, pretty much increasing her DPS. You always want to have your second ability active because this is a movement speed tool. If you sprint, you're going to be sprinting a lot faster. It's a 30% boost, unfortunately not affected by anything. So I'm just going to run around and put this effect on enemies. See, I'm not doing anything, just running around, and it's damaging enemies. It's not as strong as Bunny, but it's great to have some passive damage. Activate my fourth and nuke everything in sight. Now, enemies are going to be spawning here, dropping down, and walking into this damage field. And duration is also really important because you want this to be up as long as possible. Unfortunately, it does have a massive cooldown. Okay, enemies up in front of me. I'm not even going to attack them. I'm just going to walk around them and have them walk over my ice field, and then they die. Just simple as that. Some passive damage right there. This way, you don't even have to waste your ammo. Or even waste your energy. Sorry, mana. Activate it again. So we have a shield guy right here. Usually you can't damage him. Use your third ability. Boom. Finish him off. Not finish him off, but you know what I meant. I'm just going to drop this right here. And boom. The damage. I'll make sure I'm going to walk around all of this area because this is where enemies are going to be spawning. My second ability is back up and it's still active. Just recast it. Watch out for the fire, guys. But take a look at how strong we are. Our shields are gone, but with our second ability active, running around, it regenerates. Of course, if enemies are not continuously shooting at you. Alright. These guys... Oh! Bombers. It's fine. They walked over my ice doo-doo. Damage? Oh, yeah! You see those little ice spheres around me? That's going to deal damage. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a duration, and it does run out. Alright. It's going to spawn. I'm going to use the fourth ability. Oh, look at that. Getting rid of all of those things. Boom. Dead. So yeah, this is pretty much Viessa, and she looks really cool with this hand cannon. It's almost like playing Bunny, but without the massive AoE. But you have cool ice powers. So let's go back to Albion and take a look at the entire loadout. Now, starting off with the reactor, I do have a fusion reactor, which affects my first three abilities and does not affect my fourth ability. But don't worry about that because on the build, it is going to be a neutral setup where it's not going to be doing any focus on fusion or focus on tech. I'm just going to have modifiers that affect all the abilities equally. However, this reactor is going to boost my fusion attacks a bit more. My mounting condition here is for the Nazastra, which is this hand cannon right here. Unfortunately, that blue, we ignore that blue. It's fine. Don't worry. I'll keep rolling. It's very expensive. But yeah, it's this amazing hand cannon with a unique passive. Let's have a read at that passive. On hitting an enemy's weak point, inflict the ability Devotion Mark. So if you shoot any weak point, and this is pretty good against boss fights, by the way, in the Void Intercepts. So when you shoot them, you decrease their defenses by 10%. This is right here at rank 0, so I don't have bonuses to this. And yes, I did invest a little bit into this weapon because I really love the way this weapon fires, the way it looks, and it just goes so hard with Viessa. The secondary effect, it heals allies' shields at the cost of your mana. And if you don't have enough mana, well, it's not going to heal them. And unfortunately, this is not affected by skill cost. I'm guessing the more you rank this weapon up, the less it's going to cost. So think of this weapon like the Lumina from Destiny 2, but also have a look at the affixes. I do have skill cooldown and a crit damage multiplier from my abilities. This blue skill cooldown, apparently there's a bug with the skill cooldown, especially the blue ones, where it gives you a lot more if it's in the blue rather than when it's in the gold. Some weird reverse calculation over here. However, if you want to target farm a reactor with different conditions, you can always go to your world map, make sure you're in the hard difficulty, and at the bottom, difficulty level rewards. Click on this, and when you're in this section, you can see all the different type of reactors you can farm with the corresponding element, bullet type, and the unique alignment of those abilities. So if you want to target farm something, make sure you're looking for the correct rounds, let's say general rounds, and I'm looking for a chill reactor. These are the only ones I can find. This is a general rounds, and it gives me fusion, which works really well for Viessa. So when I click on this, it shows me anywhere in this area. If I do any of these missions right here in Kingston, it's going to drop a fusion reactor with general rounds. These reactors rotate weekly. You see 5 days right there. So if you want to see the weekly rotation, make sure you view all rewards. And now, these are all the ones in green are the current schedule. It literally says it right there. Then you're going to have the next cycle. All right, now that you have an idea of the reactor, let's take a look at my components. Running the Polar Night set. This is from Dead Bride in hard mode. You got that chill power at the 2 set, but for each frostbite stack inflicted upon an enemy, your firearm crit damage is increased. Your skill critical hit damage is then further increased up to 10 stacks for 5 seconds. So applying cold effects is pretty huge. So when you go to a boss, you can just drop your 4th ability. It's going to tick on the enemy or any enemy walking around your 2nd ability. Boom, you get bonus critical damage. And for regular gameplay and killing anything with abilities, you have that crit damage on your abilities. And this has a 30% chance of triggering. Now, when defeating an enemy inflicted with Frostbite, it inflicts additional damage equivalent to 12% of the enemy's HP. But this is also not bad for nuking. And moving on to the Ascendant modules. Just like my Bunny and Freyna loadouts, I did go a bit overboard with my Viessa. I just really liked the way she played. Now, you may be wondering, why am I not using Focus on Chill or any of those Tech Master and all that? It's because I want all her abilities to be equal in terms of damage to a certain point. So that's why I went with Technician. This is a skill power modifier, and I have Chill Specialist. This increases my Chill skill power. And because all of my abilities are chill, this is a nice boost. Take a look. Chill Specialist is a battle mod, while Technician is an attack mod. So for those thinking about power increase, this is also a battle mod and does not stack with Chill Specialist. This is a skill power modifier. This is skill power. They're two different things and work in tandem to further boost your damage. Other than that, I went for your usual HP, defense for survivability, skill extension for the skill duration, so my 2nd ability could last as long. Same with my 4th ability, because I wanted to be there to deal enough damage, and I want to have this up at all times with 0 to no downtime. Here I have a Skill Insight and Emergency Measures. Both of these give me skill critical chance. If we were to have a look at Viessa right now, she gets a 42% skill critical hit. So these two mods are a 2.8 times crit chance multiplier. And this also gives me skill critical hit damage, which pairs well with this skill critical hit damage. So using the set bonus along with the reactor bonus and emergency measures, we're going to get a 2 times critical damage multiplier on our abilities. So allowing us to deal 2 times the damage when we crit. Okay, Strong Mentality for the skill cost reduction, skill expansion to increase the range, very important, especially with her 4th ability, 3rd ability, and the explosion on the 1st ability. And finally, Nimble Fingers to reduce the cooldown. This over here doesn't really matter as much for the first 3 abilities, but it does affect the 4th ability quite a lot. It has a 60-second cooldown, so at least with this cooldown reduction, we bring it down to 40 seconds. Otherwise, this is interchangeable, especially if you don't worry too much about the 4th ability, and you just want it to be there when it's ready. You have pretty good options, like Multi-Talented. So when using a fusion skill, you get skill cost reduction, and you increase the duration, and when using a tech skill, you increase its range and its damage. So this is a great mod to have if you're not too worried about the cooldown on this ability. If you check out the 1st ability, it just goes from 7 to 6. It's not bad. If you had this mod, it goes to 4.7. It's not as bad. So I'll demonstrate how Multi-Talented works. All right, I activated my ability. You see how we have Multi-Talented triggered right there. Use my 4th ability. Boom. Multi-Talented. It's pretty good damage. And you see how it lasts a bit longer, and with that hypothermia augment triggering all that damage over time. Very nice to have. So, running around with my 2nd ability, hypothermia is active. Use my 3rd ability, hypothermia. We're dealing crazy amounts of damage. You see our 2nd ability is still active. I can recast it thanks to the cooldown reduction that we have, which is more than enough. And after a long time, we have our 4th ability back up again. Right there, Multi-Talented trigger again. Beautiful. Now, the only downside is this has its own duration. So when you trigger one of these effects, it has to tick down, and once the 5 seconds are over, only then you can re-trigger it. Unfortunately, you cannot refresh this, but it's nice to have. Otherwise, there's time distribution, which also functions as a skill cooldown reduction and HP modifier. If you want even more range, you have frugal mindset for skill cost reduction and skill effect range. So you have some flex slots over here. And finally, when you're fighting bosses is going to be a bit different. If you have a look on the bottom right there, we got 15k HP, 18k, almost 19k defense. So we're pretty decently tanky enough. But we also have some other damage resistances. So looking at the loadout, I have HP here with some more HP. It gives me some duration. This reduces my cooldown, but also gives me some more HP. We have even more defense paired with this defense. This also gives me some skill power. I have a critical hit resistance. For those who don't know, enemies in this game can crit on you. So this reduces the amount of crit they deal on me. More duration, my elemental damage resistance. Depending on the boss you're fighting, this is another form of defense, which definitely helps out quite a lot. People underestimate this a lot and are always wondering, why am I dying? Why is the boss killing me or whatever? I have decent amount of HP, blah, blah. Elemental resistances also help. And finally, for some funnies, I have multi-talented. If you want, you can use walking a tight rope over here. If the boss deals enough damage to you and your HP is 50% or lower, you get more firearm attack. The skill power doesn't really matter too much. For some more damage, always good to have. However, if you do have some elemental resistances on your components and you're not too worried about these resistances, you can always drop this and go for other types of modules. This is the loadout I use, and it's very comfy, and I was able to tank quite a lot of hits. And in terms of my weapons, I do have my Nazastra over here with firearm attack, crit rate, crit damage. Unfortunately, I didn't get my weak point damage, which will be very good to have. So taking a look at the modules for the gun, I do have my base damage here, along with even more base damage. Yes, these are going to be additive to each other. Weak point damage multiplier. This is not crit damage. It is another multiplier. You can see right there, you have your critical damage. And just below it, you have your weak point damage. So depending on what boss you fight, you're always going to switch out your elements. So let's say you're fighting Executioner, weak to Toxin, you're fighting the Devourer, weak to Electric, either one you want. Yeah, I got my crit chance and other mods that are going to be really beneficial to have. More weak point damage, more critical multipliers, and any type of multiplier that you can add to further boost your DPS. And now for my general rounds weapon, I have the Tamer. Yes, you can use a crit tamer. A tamer gets to 40% crit rate, and it's going to get even higher with more investment. That firearm attack would be a lot better if it was more damage to Colossi. At the moment, this is what I rolled, and I kept it. The modules are pretty much the same. Base damage, weak point damage, and some more base damage. When I level this up, I will get more capacity, more investment will get into this, and it's going to get even stronger. And besides other critical multipliers, fire rate and magazine will be also beneficial. And descendants that can make Crit Tamer go even harder are descendants like Valby with their skill module that increases crit chance on their weapons. Anyway, folks, this is my Viessa loadout for general gameplay and bossing. The all-rounder and the beast, the real tank of the game. Viessa. No, really, this is just for bossing. But if you want to use that build in regular gameplay, you're free to do so. Just show off to your friends that, look at me, I can't die. But anyway, folks, that has been it for me. I do hope you enjoyed and learned something from this video. And if you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more TFD content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, a peace. Bye-bye now.